On this Saturday night, mourning the death of a Mountie, the grief and the growing memorial for the fallen BC officer and father killed in the line of duty.
I'm just sad. Someone went to work, didn't come home.
1 year on.
It preys on people's minds every time something forms in the Gulf down.
The struggle to rebuild in Port-aux-Basques ahead of the anniversary of Hurricane Fiona. Growing concerns about shrinking glaciers and rivers in the Rockies.
So this is actually worse than the worst case scenario.
The fears and far-reaching consequences of a devastating drought. A rare cosmic gift.
It's almost like, a snapshot in time from 4.6 billion years ago.
The asteroid sample returning to Earth and the questions it could help us answer.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Neetu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with a BC community in mourning over the killing of an RCMP constable gunned down in the line of duty. Ridge Meadows RCMP Constable Rick O'Brien was honored with a somber funeral procession last night as his body was transported to Abbotsford, BC. The 51-year-old officer was fatally shot during an altercation while searching a home in Coquitlam, BC. 2 other officers were also injured. A suspect was shot but survived. He was arrested and has now been formally charged. Julia Foy is outside the RCMP station in Maple Ridge, BC, where a memorial honoring O'Brien has been growing. Julia, what's been the community's reaction and how are they remembering Constable O'Brien?
Neetu, I'm here outside Ridge Meadows RCMP, where we've been watching dozens of people stop by this memorial site, bringing flowers, letters, and mementos, all to honor and remember Constable Rick O'Brien, who died in the line of duty on Friday afternoon. Now, he was attending in a neighboring community of Coquitlam. He was issuing a search warrant with at least 2 other members. An altercation broke out at a condo in Coquitlam. Shots rang out, and unfortunately, Constable Rick O'Brien was killed at the scene.
All of his service with the RCMP has been in Ridge Meadows Detachment as a frontline police officer and in community policing. Within months of starting, he was involved in the rescue of several victims as a result of a home invasion, including a child, and the subsequent arrest of the suspects. For his actions, he received a commendation from the CO for bravery and a provincial award.
According to McDonald, Ottawa-born O'Brien had just celebrated his 7th year of service with the Ridge Meadows RCMP. Today, he's being remembered as a father and husband who led by example.
Every day in our province, men and women put on a uniform to go out and to keep our communities and our people safe. Sometimes they don't return home.
Today, we heard from many people about what he meant to them or what he did and meant to the community.
Just having to lose a couple more police officers is not right. And it's heartbreaking when you think about it.
It was important to be here because we love and respect police officers and law enforcement, and we have a law enforcement family. Daddy's a police officer, and my dad was, and my grandfather was.
A source has told Global News that the suspect that was taken into custody after the condo shooting remains in hospital, but has been charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. 2 fellow officers who were also injured in the shooting have since been released from hospital and been reunited with their families. More information about a public memorial for Constable Rick O'Brien will be coming in the next few days or weeks. Back to you, Neetu.
Julia Foy in Maple Ridge, BC. Thanks, Julia. Constable O'Brien is the 10th police officer killed in the past 12 months. In May, Ontario Police Sergeant Eric Mueller died during a shooting. In March, Quebec Police Sergeant Maureen Bro was killed in a stabbing. That same month, Edmonton Constables Brett Ryan and Travis Jordan were both fatally shot, responding to a domestic dispute. In December 2022, Ontario Police Constable Greg Piershala died after being shot in an ambush. In October 2022, Burnaby RCMP RCMP Constable Shaylin Yang was fatally stabbed responding to a welfare check. That same month, South Simcoe Police Constables Devin Northrup and Morgan Russell were shot while responding to a disturbance call and later died. And last September, Toronto Constable Andrew Hong was killed by a lone gunman during his break. To the mounting tension now between Canada and India over Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's explosive allegation, potentially linking that country to the killing of Canadian Sikh leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. India denies any wrongdoing, but there are questions about how Canada's allies should respond to the diplomatic dispute. Brittany Rosen reports.
This house belongs to the older brother of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Nijjar's uncle in India says the property seized by India's top investigation agency today as the Sikh separatist murder remains at the center of a diplomatic row.
We are deeply concerned about the allegations that Prime Minister Trudeau has raised.
Canada's closest allies, including the U.S., have publicly expressed worry over tensions with India. They've also pressed for answers.
It would be important that India work with the Canadians on this investigation.
But not one of the Five Eyes intelligence alliance has accused Delhi for its alleged connection to Nijjar's assassination. This despite reports one of its members provided some level of intelligence to Ottawa.
The allies are in a bind. It's a no-win, really, for the U.S., for the U.K., and for other Western countries.
Who supplied the additional intelligence and what its contents are remain unclear. But one expert says it was likely Washington, given reports that President Biden raised the matter with the Indian Prime Minister at the G20 summit. Allies are walking a tightrope between backing Canada while not fracturing relations with India.
India is the West's big bet in containing China.
A much-needed ally for the West as a counteroffensive to Beijing's projection of power. India is quickly becoming a state to be reckoned with one of the largest militaries and an economy on track to become the third largest in the world by 2030.
Neither country wants to imperil the long-term future of the relationship. So I think that the hope is that in due course, cooler minds will prevail.
It isn't yet clear what the seizure of Nijjar's brother's property in India signals about Delhi's intentions. Will it conduct its own private investigation or concede and cooperate with the Canadian government? Those questions remain top of mind in what appears to be a diplomatic game of chicken between the two countries. Neetu.
Brittany Rosen in Washington. Thanks, Brittany. As the rift between India and Canada deepens, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau now finds himself in a diplomatic bind and a battle with the world's largest democracy. Prior to the death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Trudeau was touting Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy as a way to pull economic reliance away from China over foreign interference. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stevenson spoke with Defence Minister Bill Blair about how this feud with India jeopardizes the Canadian government's economic strategy.
One of the biggest commitments your government has made on the defense file is to the Indo-Pacific strategy, and it seems like now you're in a bit of a difficult situation with India, and the experts who we're speaking to on this show are saying they don't expect this standoff to disappear quickly. Has this jeopardized your government's ability to proceed with that if you have India basically very angry with Canada and likely not looking to cooperate?
Well, Mercedes, just to be very clear, if the intelligence that we've received is proven to be accurate, then there's a very significant concern that Canada will have with respect to the violation of our sovereignty and the murder of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. And at the same time, I also want to acknowledge the importance of the Indo-Pacific strategy. We've been working very hard over the past several years, and most recently in building trade agreements in the region, and through the Canadian Armed Forces, we have been increasing our presence and patrols in the region. And so the Indo-Pacific region, including our relationship with India, is important to us, but also standing up for the international rules-based order and ensuring that we defend our sovereignty and our citizens is our first priority. And so, we understand that this can be and has proven to be a challenging issue with respect to our relationship with India, but at the same time, we have a responsibility to defend the law, defend our citizens, and at the same time make sure that we conduct a thorough investigation and get to the truth.
Tropical storm Ophelia has made landfall along the east coast of the United States, lashing communities with strong winds and dangerous storm surges. The governors of North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland each declared a state of emergency Friday, closing schools and canceling weekend events. The fierce storm hit North Carolina's coastline early this morning with near hurricane strength winds clocking 110 kilometers per hour. Ophelia is expected to weaken as it turns north before taking a turn to the northeast tomorrow. Tomorrow marks 1 year since the small town of Port-aux-Basques in Newfoundland and Labrador was devastated by post-tropical storm Fiona. The extreme weather event whipped up fierce winds and huge storm surges, causing 100 homes to crumble. One woman was killed. The Insurance Bureau of Canada says Fiona was the most costly storm in Atlantic Canada's history and the 10th overall in Canada. And a year on, as Mike Drolet reports, many of those who lost everything are being told they can't rebuild.
The rocky shoreline of Port-aux-Basques looks serene today. Park benches and gravel mark the edge of Water Street. What a difference a year makes.
Oh my God, we gotta go.
Same spot, different video. Post-tropical storm Fiona didn't give residents much time to react as the 15-meter-high storm surge tore through homes, almost dragging Brian Osmond out to sea.
I thought I was gone. When my brother come out, he thought I was a guy.
Before Fiona, Port-aux-Basques residents hadn't worried too much about hurricanes, which most often hit the eastern part of the province, if at all. Those beliefs have certainly changed.
It preys on people's minds every time something forms in the Gulf down south, down Barbados or the Grenadines. People pay a lot more attention to it now because they know the impact is, it's possible that it's gonna come back.
At an announcement this week regarding the ongoing issue of recovery funds, MP Goody Hutchings spoke of the new reality.
So folks, look, we know the oceans are rising, the water temperatures are warmer in the oceans, hurricanes are stronger, and they're more deadly than we've seen before.
And when it became clear insurance companies were going to refuse to pay damages, citing the absence of surge protection, the province was left with a difficult choice to make. Parts of Port-aux-Basques determined to be in Fiona's impact zone would be declared off limits. So homes that were destroyed won't be rebuilt, and some that survived will be torn down, roughly 150 in total. Owners will be compensated, but they don't have a choice in the matter.
Some people are very relieved. Some people are very upset. Some people are terribly confused. I know someone who's in a very low-lying area. Their house wasn't impacted, and they've got to go. However, 3 or 4 houses down, another house that was impacted remains.
Clearly much is left to figure out for this small town on the southwestern tip of Newfoundland. The scars left from Fiona still fresh in their minds. Mike Drolet, Global News.
Cracking down on migrant trafficking. Coming up, the Italian Prime Minister's call to wage a global war against smugglers. The migrant crisis gripping Europe is only getting worse. Today, the Pope criticized countries for their lack of urgency and action. Speaking at a conference in southern France, Pope Francis condemned what he says is belligerent nationalism and indifference. The pontiff called for greater tolerance for migrants crossing the sea and that countries should find more ways to help them. Otherwise, they risk turning the Mediterranean into a sea of death. The Pope's remarks come as Italy's Prime Minister calls for help with the number of undocumented migrants arriving there doubling this year. Redmond Shannon reports.
In the space of 1 week this month, around 11,000 migrants arrived in Italy's southernmost island of Lampedusa. That's almost twice its population.
We were in the sea for almost 30 hours.
Most were quickly sent for processing in Sicily. But many island residents have had enough. Italian Prime Minister Georgia Meloni visited with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
Migration is a European challenge and it needs a European answer and solution.
Von der Leyen has issued an EU plan, much of it focused on preventing arrivals and sending migrants back. This week, Meloni told the UN she wants help to target migration's root causes and to stop people smugglers. Last year, she was elected on a pledge to reduce migration.
We're seeing a little bit of, I would say, radicalization of this approach to close borders, or at least to attempt to.
In July, both leaders signed the latest deal to prevent departures, this time with Tunisia. But it does not appear to have worked so far, and some migrants found themselves stranded in no man's land between Tunisia and Libya. In the EU, as ever, its 27 governments find it difficult to agree on any solution.
I really think that the political discourse is toxic right now in Europe.
Italian migration analyst Kelly Petillo says properly implementing safe and legal pathways for economic migrants would help make immigration more functional, as would better cooperation on settling refugees, something the US, Canada and Italy met about in New York this week.
When we look at the actual facts and the statistics and compare them with other countries outside of Europe, like Turkey, we are not really talking about huge numbers.
Nonetheless, 178,000 have risked their lives crossing the Mediterranean Sea so far this year. And as long as global inequality remains, that's unlikely to stop. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Ahead, an historic glacial melt, the impacts of a devastating drought in Western Canada. Tonight, there's grave concern over rapidly melting glaciers and rivers being severely impacted by the warmer than normal conditions and lack of precipitation in the mountains. As Jamie Dahl reports, Alberta's Rockies are bearing the brunt.
Dryland training in preparation of his 50th season in the sport he helped birth. But the landscape has shifted greatly since legendary alpinist Jim Elzinga first swung his axe into a frozen waterfall.
The glaciers that I visited are just about no longer there, and these glaciers and these ice faces are disappearing. They're just becoming big pieces of rock.
The Rockies are at the epicenter of a devastating drought that has had far-reaching consequences across Western Canada. Glacial melt this summer has been historic. The iconic Athabasca Glacier had a downward melt of 9 meters this year, the biggest loss ever recorded. And there's more.
Well, this year we didn't get the rains, but we had the reduced snowpack and the early melt. And so this is actually worse than the worst case scenario that we had been suggesting for the end of the century.
As a result, Pomeroy says crucial waterways like the Bow River in Alberta are experiencing the lowest stream flows ever measured, and many are starting to feel it.
This always has water in it throughout the season, and then you can see now it's like bare. We're worried for sure.
Fishing guides in Canmore have not been able to get into places they normally would.
The river is so low that there's spots on the river where it becomes very multi-braided channels that you ground out. It's disappointing.
Pomeroy is calling the depletion of critical water sources a national emergency that needs urgent attention.
We need to manage our water differently in Canada, and we don't have time. We have to do this very, very quickly.
It will take record-breaking snow and rainfalls to recover from the current deficit, according to Pomeroy. And unfortunately, we are in an El Nino year that typically brings warmer and drier conditions to this area. For Jim Elzinga, the toughest climb may lie ahead, inspiring environmental stewardship before it's too late. Jamie Dahl, Global News, Canmore.
Long-distance delivery next. Preparations as NASA's first asteroid sample makes its way to Earth. This is a big weekend for the Canadian Space Agency and their colleagues at NASA. The OSIRIS-REx spacecraft is on its way home, and it's bringing samples from the surface of an asteroid. Here's Mike Armstrong.
This is a dry run for the big event to come. The team at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Texas rehearsing what they'll do when they get their hands, albeit gloved, on a long-distance delivery.
We're all very excited about that.
Kim Tate is part of the Canadian delegation headed down to Texas for what is a NASA first. The capsule set to tumble to Earth Sunday will be carrying material from an asteroid likely about 4.6 billion years old. For Canada's contribution to the $800 million mission, Canadian scientists will get 4% of the material to bring home and study.
The one thing I can guarantee is that we will find something we didn't expect.
And liftoff of OSIRIS-REx.
The spacecraft was launched in 2016. Its destination, Bennu, a carbon-rich asteroid mostly covered in rocks and boulders and about the size of the CN Tower. Now, the mission wasn't just to take some pictures. It touched down on the surface in 2020 to collect samples. One of Canada's contributions was an altimeter, an instrument that helped with the landing.
We didn't know the gravity field as well as we needed to do to understand how the spacecraft would react around Bennu, so our data really helped that.
The journey home was more than 1.9 billion kilometers. NASA won't know exactly how much material the capsule's carrying until scientists open it next week, but they believe there's about 250 grams, about the same weight as a cell phone.
We'll be looking for carbon-bearing minerals. We'll be looking for organics, amino acids, because all of these things are the sort of materials that were delivered to Earth that helped life flourish here.
Now, if things go according to plan, OSIRIS-REx will release its sample return capsule early Sunday morning, but its job won't be over. While scientists will start analyzing what it's brought back, it'll head out again. In 2029, it's supposed to catch up to and study another asteroid, Apophis, sort of as an encore. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. From the OSIRIS-REx to a Tyrannosaurus Rex, we'll leave you tonight with a sculpture fit for a prehistoric king. Tonight's Your Canada is this giant 17,000-pound metal T-Rex statue in Penticton, BC. Commissioned for a vacation rental property, sculptor Kevin Stone worked on it for 2 years. The dinosaur statue finally roared into its new home on Thursday. Thanks for watching.